We got a terrific group of experts lined up for us this morning to talk about how to make solar more bankable. So this is an exciting time, right? So solar's been around a while now, and learning how to implement, getting their supply chain set up, making their solutions more affordable. But let's face it, there's a reality out there that solar doesn't work all the time, right? Most of the time it doesn't work when and how much we want it to. Sometimes it's giving too little, sometimes it's giving too much. And the reality is it's not what I would call a standby resource, right? So when you're connected to the grid, you guys think of, whether you're at home or at your business, you think of, when I need to turn the lights on, they turn on. When I need to power the refrigerator, it turns on, and so on. And except for, we can make some exceptions for very large grid-connected solar fields that are well managed. But beyond that, most of the time solar is just kind of hanging out, kind of contributing once in a while, really not as a standby resource. Well, the times are changing. And now's the moment that we can actually make solar look and feel and act like a real generation resource, a real standby resource that you can depend on. And of course, that makes the systems more capable. It makes them more cost-effective over the long term to actually deploy them as a true energy resource. So we're going to talk this morning, that's our topic. We're going to talk about how make solar combined with energy storage and how it makes the overall system more bankable. Again, I got a great group of experts here with me, and I'll let them do a couple of introductions to get us started. Go ahead, Vic.
Hello, good morning. My name is Vic Singh. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Dragonfly Energy Corporation. We're based in Reno, Nevada, just up the road here from Vegas. And we are a lithium battery pack supplier and system integrator, mainly focused on the RV, residential, and smaller off-grid behind-the-meter-like applications, providing that flexibility for folks to mitigate diesel burn or leverage more solar to meet their needs.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. My name is Olivia Amiette. I'm the founder and CEO of Infinite Energy Advisors. We're a full-service EPC for solar and batteries. We focus on residential and commercial solar, and a lot of people know us by being Habitat for Humanity's solar provider. I also founded and started a solar training school. We are home to Georgia's first DOL-approved registered apprenticeship program, and we train for solar skills, solar sales, solar installations, the whole 9 yards. We're based in Cleveland, Georgia, which is a little bit of a rural town, but if you've heard of Helen, Georgia, the little German town, you might have seen us. So if you're ever in the area, feel free to stop by.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Travis Torrey. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Stryten Energy. We are a vanadium battery component producer. We produce mostly stacks and electrolyte for the vanadium batteries deployed here in the U.S. We kicked off. We've got locations in Atlanta and in Boston, and have been producing since about February this year, so we're relatively new.
Thank you, team. Well, you guys are all experts in your field. I'm not going to go easy on you. The first question is the one everybody thinks about, levelized cost of energy. Not first cost, but how are you guys getting the cost out, and how does a solar plus storage system work and perform better with storage, and how do you get that overall cost over the life of the system out of the system? Can we start with you, Vic?
Sure. Well, there's two main components we're talking about. It's the storage and the solar. At Dragonfly, we're talking about much smaller installations. We're really at most residential, but usually we're providing power to someone's mobile home, whether that's a recreational vehicle or it's a long-haul truck. And so what I've noticed is two things. One, the battery cost has come down drastically over the last 5 to 10 years, and that was a big barrier to entry in a lot of these markets. Whether you're looking at long-haul trucking or even you're looking at RVing, if you're relying on a diesel generator or a lead-acid battery historically, then the lithium needs to be a relatively low cost of entry to be competitive for those folks in somewhat low-margin businesses. And then two, once you add the solar, there really needs to be a value add in our markets that goes beyond just the ability to say maybe peak shave a little bit. What we've seen most is it's the elimination of diesel burn. So in recreational vehicles, These folks are charging their batteries off the alternator and getting additional power from their solar panels and eliminating the need to burn a diesel generator at a campsite, eliminating the noise associated with that diesel generator. Same way in long-haul trucking, it's important you eliminate the need to auto-idle the truck. Rely on solar for, say, additional power in the hotel cab or to power the lift gate. And if that ROI is there, we're definitely starting to see more and more adoption across these markets.
Interesting. Most of the time when you install a microgrid, solar plus storage system, you're competing against the utility in the area. You're actually competing against diesel costs.
Diesel and lead acid, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there any way to kind of grade or judge? Is it harder to compete against diesel or harder to compete against the utility?
I think with diesel, in my opinion, it's a little bit easier to compete with diesel than lead acid batteries for two reasons. One, the diesel has a much clearer ROI for the fleets and the folks that are buying gas at a gas station.
Right.
But one thing I also noticed is running a diesel generator or auto-idling a diesel truck is uncomfortable for the people that live in said truck or recreational vehicle. So the diesel generators tend to have a little bit more of a quality of experience value add as well, which I think helps us compete with diesel a little bit more than lead acid, because lead acid is essentially doing the same thing. It's just lower flexibility, higher weight, less capacity, these sorts of things.
So there's clearly a cost component, but there's a lot of other benefits as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Olivia, any thoughts on LCOE?
Yeah, definitely. So from my lens, again, as a reminder, we do residential and commercial solar. And when it comes to LCOE, we have a couple different considerations. I think to echo what you were saying, peak shaving is huge for commercial applications. You really need to see that demand cost go down. And so I'm seeing the market shift a lot. And to echo really what, if anybody attended the general session, what Abby Hopper said, I think nowadays solar and batteries are synonymous, and you almost infer that they're together. So when you hear about a solar system, you're like, what's your battery? Whereas before, batteries were sort of an add-on. So the market is definitely changing. So I would say the peak demand and the peak shifting is huge for commercial applications in terms of this cost savings that it brings literally on day one. And similarly, for residential purposes, really you see the power behind the energy storage, being able to cut down their usage at night because you have that energy storage. It's making your energy dispatchable and accessible on demand. So that's kind of what we see from both the residential and commercial perspective. But I would definitely say that nowadays I'm really seeing a market shift to have solar plus battery as just a synonymous term.
On your residential customers, do you like the kind of the RV owners and the truckers, do they have other benefits other than the cost equation that they pursue as a solar plus storage system on their homes?
Yeah, so I would say kind of similar to the generator situation and the sort of diesel area that you were speaking on. A lot of people in my area of Cleveland, Georgia, we're in kind of a remote spot, so we see a lot of people go for generators. But the problem with that is if you have an extended power outage, which oftentimes they do, they don't really have a great way to go and get more to fill up their generators. So with the batteries and the energy storage, they have the same benefits, if you will, from the generator, except they don't have to leave their house and they don't have to worry about it running out, especially when they have solar, because it recharges the battery and it all goes in a cycle.
So resiliency is a big play for the homeowners.
Huge. Resiliency, cost savings, convenience, the whole 9 yards.
Okay. Travis, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think as we look at LCOS as it relates to solar and batteries, I think in a lot of ways I agree. They're almost becoming synonymous across the system. The other thing we're seeing is substantial growth in the duration of batteries that are on those solar systems, going from what was originally 2-hour batteries to 4-hour batteries. We're now seeing inroads into 6-hour batteries and even longer. As those peaks and troughs tend to shift over time as the application basis, and we see more EVs come onto the marketplace, as well as additional shifts from more renewables changing the supply. The adaptability of having a battery on that system that can manage a significant amount of cycles, as well as a long duration of those cycles, really allows you to take the energy when it's available and deploy that energy when it is most cost effective. And that balancing act, I think, is continuing to shift. We've seen shifts even in the utility basis around ERCOT, where they're looking towards stuff like ECC and trying to drive to longer and longer durations to be more dispatchable.
Thank you. Let me segue off your thoughts on specifically comments on long duration. There's clearly different chemistry types, different battery types, and it's here. To Olivia's point, it's considered an assumption now that solar and storage go together, but it's still pretty new. And whether they're integrators or EPCs, whoever they might be, they're making mistakes. What are the most common kind of mismatches you might see between end customer's goals and the actual battery type that they're applying? Do you have any thoughts on that, Olivia?
I sure do. So coming from somebody who does a lot of workforce development and installation training, batteries and energy storage, to your point, yes, they are a newer technology, and it is hard to find a solar installer who has that expertise with energy storage and really making all of the components marry well together. So one of the things that I really often see is using a long duration battery in a short-term use and vice versa. So knowing which battery chemistry to use, knowing which battery type to use, knowing about your dispatchable behaviors, that's really huge, and a lot of installers and designers, truthfully, don't necessarily have their minds wrapped around it fully. That's why we love to lean on manufacturers like Stryten in our design considerations to make sure that we have these sanity checks, like, hey, is this actually going to do what we want it to do? And that helps, of course, the end user, because they have an idea in their mind of what they want, and our job is to make sure that we can execute that. I would also say another sort of consideration is the site conditions. We see that a lot. A lot of times, of course, on the larger energy storage solutions, we need, concrete slabs poured, and we got to make sure that they're the right specs, and outdoor versus indoor rated. Where is it going? Little details like this can really hold up a project and stop the progress and really mess it up. So I would say those are kind of high level from a bird's eye view, what we see a lot of people mess up on.
Okay, all right. Travis, any mismatches in your view of the world?
Yeah, so I believe one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in deployments is actually related to the timeline of the projects. So as the projects get larger and larger, you end up facing interconnect queues that can be substantially impactful on the overall project. They can exist for longer than 2 years in some cases, and those interconnect queues drive a whiplash effect into the supply chain. In some cases, it enables technologies to do different things if you plan on those interconnect queues correctly. So, for example, it could allow you to deploy, instead of a containerized, really rapid deployment solution, you could do a vanadium solution that is built on site. If you've got 2-year lead time, you know what to do and you can plan ahead. So I think as the industry moves forward, if it learns how to leverage exactly what those project timelines look like, they can actually better deploy resources for the projects themselves.
Awesome. And Vic, maybe I'll pose the question a little different to you, maybe a little harder question. You guys are focused, Dragonfly and Battleborn are focused on lithium. And so do you ever end up in a situation where the customer's just wanting something your product doesn't apply to, and you have to maybe turn them away?
Not often. I think the biggest disconnect we run into is we're powering the hotel features of the vehicle. We're not powering the vehicle. And that's something where we have to make sure we build that clear line, is these batteries are not going to propel the RV or the truck forward. What they're going to allow you to do is stay out there longer in a more flexible fashion if you're an RVer, hopefully reduce your diesel costs and reduce the cost of plugging into shore power, even if you're incorporating that solar component. And on the trucking side, we're really trying to show them there's an ROI associated with the diesel burn and these sorts of things, and make it clear that these batteries aren't going to power the truck. What I will say, though, is the system integration isn't trivial. When you're trying to do a combination of have a hotel bank, have the ability to charge off shore power, have the ability to pull energy from the sun if you have a solar panel attached, have the ability to charge off the alternator when you're driving down the road. It's not trivial to make sure you have the right components in place, whether it's inverters, DC-DC controllers, that are going to handle these loads, transfer the loads between different systems in an efficient manner. and not cause customer service issues. And so that's why Dragonfly is really focused on not just building the packs, but building turnkey systems to avoid issues like that.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, let's switch gears to regulatory. No good panel discussion here would be fit without some regulatory talking. ITC for solar is sunsetting. Is solar able to stand on its own? A lot of years, the federal support, the state support, they've done what they've meant to do, right? Kickstart a new innovative industry, get the supply chain set up, get the cost down, and so on. Can they stand on their own without the support? Go.
Okay, I'll go first. These guys probably know a little bit more about this than me, but I think over the last decade, the cost of generating electricity with solar has become low enough to where it's on parity with some of these other options for utilities, whether it's natural gas or something like that. But the problem's always been the storage. Once you add the storage in, the levelized cost would always be a little bit too high for a lot of these applications. What I've seen is, no, I don't think the sunsetting of the ITCs is going to kill solar because of the advances in storage technology and the way we've been able to bring down those costs. So if you look at LFP in particular, our chemistry of choice, over the last just decade, you've seen that chemistry not only increase its energy density to where it's now competing with NMC and NCA and EV applications, but also because of that economy of scale and the fact that they're not using nickel and cobalt, they've been able to produce a storage technology that's very cheap, lasts a very long time, and enables some of these deployment scenarios from a levelized cost perspective. So in summary, no, I don't think it's a sunset on solar. I think it's more on the storage side now to make sure that we make these installations economically viable. And I think that's why some of these tax credits associated with the storage side are still in play.
Yeah. Olivia, this hits you straight on. This is your business. What do you think?
Yeah, so I would echo everything that he just said. I think a lot of people are worried that this is the end of solar, but I would argue that this is just a new beginning. It's definitely a loop on the solar coaster, as we call it, but really from my perspective, I see a lot of investment, even outside of the federal government, in solar and solar systems. So take, for example, Georgia Power in my territory of course, Georgia. We're having a huge VPP program, a huge investment in solar, commercial, utility scale, and even residential. And so the incentives are still there. You might just have to look a little bit harder, but I think it's pretty clear that the data and the facts show, really almost every research study ever shows, that solar is the most affordable form of generating electricity through and through. And the best part about that is that was done pre-ITC and now post-ITC. And so I think now really instead of having it be before and after solar, it's just a separate chapter that we get to explore. But I also think that it's really important for companies to focus on ways to drive the cost down, shave where you can in terms of cost to make it more accessible for people. And I think it's really important to lean on our financing partners as well in this time to make sure that people can have that sort of lower barrier of entry when it comes to solar.
Okay.
Yeah, so from my point of view, I think while the ITC is clearly important, especially as industry stand up, and it's one of the things that batteries continue to benefit from, I believe solar has seen a massive growth in net capacity, and that substantial capacity that is available allows it to deploy at a rate that far surpasses many other technologies. So if you look at, for example, natural gas turbines, very often the timeline to deploy a natural gas turbine would be 3 times longer than what it would be to deploy relatable solar, right? So solar can hit the field really quickly. And so as we see demand scale up and try to fall into place, solar clearly continues to have a place in that space. And then the batteries behind it, I think, are continuing to get better in every segment. And so I think they'll continue to press the prices lower and lower as we see benefits across the industry. But I think solar clearly has a space in this industry still.
So same question. Let me pose it a little different. If you look across our RE Plus audience here, There's a whole bunch of folks out there that classify themselves as integrators or EPCs, and specifically for solar. Now that maybe, let's say the game has changed and the federal regulatory environment is more in support of the battery side of the world, now most of those EPCs that are kind of solar focused, do you see them actually changing their focus to a battery focus? Or maybe even, let me say one way different again, do you see EPCs or integrators standing up that are battery focused first and then they bring the solar in? Because if you look at what's happening today, these established long-term solar providers are there. They've been, to some degree, living off of the subsidies, bringing batteries in when it's convenient. Is that going to flip?
I would love to start on this one. So I definitely think it's going to flip. I think if you're a sort of one-trick pony and you only know how to do solar, it's almost like an oxymoron. If you only know how to do solar, you don't really know solar. I feel like, from my perspective, especially from a workforce development training perspective, you've got to know batteries. You have to know the ins and the outs of the system. And so for me, I think when I look at the industry and I see people only focusing on solar, that's definitely going to change. I don't think that there's going to be room for the one-trick pony type of EPCs in our industry any further. I do think that people are going to start learning batteries, and they're going to start learning how to integrate that very fast. Sort of our claim to fame early on was that we do know how to integrate batteries, generators, solar, utility, you name it, we can add it onto the system. And that's really where I see the future of a solar professional becoming. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing the curriculum, maybe in NABCEP, things of the sort, kind of alter a little bit, maybe have a little bit more of a focus on batteries. I think they actually added recently a battery focus to their curriculum. But I definitely think that the folks who are focusing on batteries, I think one of the interesting things that we're going to see is a lot of merge going on, a lot of synergy going on with the people who focus on batteries, the people who focus on solar, sharing insights and really working together. So I'm hoping that the changes will actually bring a lot of us together.
Yeah, basically, we're going to reorganize to some degree as an industry as more solution providers rather than either solar or battery or some individual component. It's an integrated solution.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so I'm in total agreement. I think if you look at our first battery that's going into Texas with TerraFlow, it's a 50 megawatt hour battery and it's not connected to a solar field, right? Texas, with being at ERCOT, is an open market, which means that the investors can go play in that market and they can gain profitability from a deployed battery at a large scale without requiring solar. Now, I still think solar can play a function here and can grow and can improve the profitability of various projects, but batteries can stand alone, which means that people will invest in them and you will continue to see growth in them.
Any final comments, Vic?
No, I think I would echo everything that was said before. As I mentioned, our customers, our OEMs are turning to us more and more, not just for the battery, but a turnkey solution. And the one piece I would add is even at a smaller scale behind the meter, the interconnection and ensuring that the communications are happening across these systems is very important, because once they take the battery into their long haul truck or their RV, it's not soon after that these folks are coming to us and saying, I want to see the status of this on my heads-up display. I want to make sure that I understand how much current is running from our solar to our battery, how much the alternator is pulling into the battery, how much am I pulling out of the battery during rest. So, I think the integration is extremely important. We've talked about it, but there's the hardware integration, and then there's also the software integration that I think we need to make sure we remember as well, and that's something that I've definitely been educated on over the last 2-3 years for sure.
Wow, it takes a lot of talent. You have to be really flexible, and you have to have a broad kind of scope in terms of software, hardware, equipment, suppliers, et cetera, to get all the pieces put together. That's neat. Okay, I think this is what the audience wants to know. They want to hear some real examples. They want to know if you guys can provide some recent examples of things that you've done, solar plus storage, that just were clearly runaway winners, if you can put it that way, right? So just things that you maybe even surprised yourself in terms of the profitability and the benefit that site and the end customer was able to achieve with that site.
Yeah, I could start again. I have examples both residential and commercial. For commercial, I'll refer to one of our clients. So we also do work in really the greater southeastern part of the United States. So Buncombe County is one of our clients, and we recently did an AC coupled energy storage addition to their solar system. And really right off the bat, our philosophy is always start small, add as you need it, look at the data to help justify your further investment. And that's exactly what they did. And right off the bat, they actually reduced their consumption and especially their peak demand by 25%. So that's a considerable amount when you're talking about a smaller battery addition. And I think really, to Vic's point, it's about making sure that the software is integrated, making sure that the systems are integrated in hardware, and really marrying them together to walk that fine line of efficacy. From a residential perspective, Habitat for Humanity for us, we are actually working on a 68 home community, the first ever of its kind. All of them will have solar, and they're all independent, so it's not a microgrid. And really in these homes, we're kind of going with a little bit of a larger battery, something that we expect will cover their usage because it's automatically just an energy efficient home, which is great because Habitat builds these homes and we can have some input there. So what we're doing is we're really simulating and we're actually gaining the data as each of these houses are built of how effective the battery is. And so what we did was in our first one, we had her, the homeowner, go without the battery for a couple months. And then now we have the battery in and we're testing it. And it has completely wiped out her utility bill. And so that's a really big win for us. We were able to get it at a great cost. Like we've been talking about, these batteries are really dropping in cost. There's still incentives that are out there. And so it was really great to be able to see all of that come together.
So you could truly go off grid, a net zero type scenario.
Absolutely, yes.
Wow, that's neat. Further comments?
Okay, I've got a couple in the history that we've been able to work through on this one. So some of our early prototypes we deployed to Germany, for example. We were able to smooth out the peaks on a solar field over a couple of year time frame and substantially help them utilize the full field, because at times they would have overcapacity on their energy. They wouldn't have anything to do with it. By allowing us to store it, by us allowing them to store it, they were then able to deploy it later on in that date. I think that's a pretty common scenario, especially as you see kind of long durations energy storage.
Okay, so I think I have two examples. One is more, I appreciated how much the customer experience is changing with the addition of solar. So that's the first one I'll go through. If you look at a lot of RVers, one of the most common comments I've seen with our sales team and from some of our customers is, boy, these campsites are a lot more quiet because there's not as much diesel generators running around everywhere. So whether it's the trucker or the RVer, the addition of solar is definitely providing them this user experience that otherwise wasn't possible before, I think. And then one other example I was really impressed by is applying solar for trucking for liftgate solutions. So when you're doing a lot of low mileage deliveries over the course of a day requiring a liftgate, a lot of these folks are idling their engines and they're having to really push their starter batteries and their diesel generators quite a bit. And so leveraging solar to never power the vehicle or even provide hotel power, but just simply allow them to run the liftgate without touching the engine it's provided the fleets an ROI, and it's something that I've seen solar make an immediate impact, and the cost of the solar and the storage was not prohibitive.
That's awesome. Really neat to hear that not only we're getting these win-win scenarios where you're not only getting the cost benefit, but you've got all these other qualitative benefits that go along with it, and you get security. Right, so really neat way we're putting the pieces together here for the full customer experience. Okay, we've been dancing around it. We talk about solutions providers and how you have to fit all the pieces together, and that's really what your customers are looking for and how you're doing that for them. But there's got to be a couple of things as solutions providers that are your pain points, right? That really hurt right now, and if you could, you'd fix them. So what are those kind of technical challenges or hurdles that you're facing right now that, comes up too often that you'd like to see get improved quickly here in the industry?
I can start off. I think the biggest hurdles I've noticed near term are the software and the integration between all these different components. A truck uses a very different communication protocol than an RV. And if you're going to go into industrial solar applications, now you're looking at Ethernet instead of CAN bus or something like that. And so I don't necessarily have a solution to it in mind, but what I think, what I've definitely noticed is our engineers are not as much struggling with, can I find the right components for this installation that are cost effective and provide the right specifications for the end use, but are they going to talk to each other correctly? Are they going to engage one another when they need to? And whether it's technical support or the customer, are they going to have proper eyes on this system to understand what's going on and either diagnose issues or provide that real user experience that's necessary to deploy these sorts of things on a large scale? So I don't necessarily have a solution. I think there's the work that needs to be, I think naturally it'll occur as more and more of these folks are integrating into systems, but the software is non-trivial, and there's a lot of different communication protocols and security protocols, depending on what market you're looking at, that don't make it easy to make sure that your solar panels, your solar charge controllers, your inverters, your batteries are all speaking to each other and providing information in an efficient manner.
Right, and it's only going to get worse as high security requirements enter the fold, right? Whether it's military or data center or whatever it might be, where we have to closely control the data that is being managed. So yes, the software is a big deal.
Yeah, I would also echo the software. So my background at Georgia Tech was actually computer science, so I'm very familiar with software-related issues. For me, the monitoring platforms, I think, are a little bit lackluster. For larger commercial applications in particular, and C&I spaces, 15-minute interval data is simply not enough. And especially when you see these systems age, having only 15 minutes of interval data is just, it's not going to tell you what you need to know. And when you look at other solutions like, flying out drones to diagnose the health of your system, it's so expensive and it's really just a one-time thing and it doesn't provide you the data that you need. And so I think one of the best parts about being an RE Plus is you get to discover people who have add-ons to your system who can do, I even found somebody who did like 1 minute interval data, which is super helpful. And being able to look at the DC side in particular instead of only the AC side. So from a solar perspective, that's what I see. I wish it was built in. Instead of having an additional monitoring platform. We also see a lot of crosstalk with different softwares kind of competing with different numbers, and it can be very confusing for the end user. And so our goal is, especially in these larger applications, we don't necessarily want our end users to have an energy monitor in terms of like a physical person doing it to kind of make sense of all of these different numbers. We want the software to show in one easy to understand way what everything is doing accurately without any hiccups in very, very slim interval data. So that's kind of what I wish we had. Maybe in another life I would have made that, but for now my focus is elsewhere.
Software, more data. How about you, Travis? Is anything outside of those two that really touches you on a daily basis and you wish you could fix?
As on the vanadium side, right, we're a little bit different, right? We're still in the infancy of deployment. We don't have as much deployed projects as say solar or lithium or anything like that. So for us, really, it's about stabilizing the marketplace, right? That's one of the things that we took to heart as we sought to become a component supplier into the vanadium battery space. It start to create a stable supply chain that will allow it to grow and grow in a way that is reliable to achieve bankable projects.
Okay, all right, great. A few more questions to get to the end here. I think we're doing well on time. Let's just talk for just a few minutes about sustainability and recyclability. Perhaps as solar enters this new realm of solar plus storage, people are going to be thinking even more than they were before about, how do we deal with this end-of-life situation? Thoughts on, does the customer care? Does they, do they choose the system based on the chemistry, or again, going back to your solutions provisions, do you guys recommend certain things based on sustainability? Give me a little bit on how sustainability plays into the whole equation.
I could start on this one. I would say in terms of, I guess speaking on the end user perspective, it's very rare that we have somebody asking about the recyclability. We oftentimes have people ask us, what are we doing with the battery at the end of the life? How do we dispose of it? But not necessarily, is it recyclable? So for us, that's not necessarily a huge consideration. We find a lot of our clients are really just focused on the functionality. What can it do for me? Am I going to be comfortable? Do I have to do extra work when I have this in? So recyclability in our perspective isn't necessarily something that kind of leads the conversation.
Travis?
Yeah, so we've seen this play out on a market-by-market basis. So, for example, in Texas, we've seen the new regulations requiring a plan and the financing set aside to dispose of the battery at end of life. And all of a sudden, people start caring a lot when you make them, put a lot of money in escrow for it. It's one of our favorite subjects about vanadium, right? And one of the things that have benefited lead for hundreds of years is that it's infinitely recyclable. If you can get into that infinitely recyclable chain, it really allows you to drive cost mechanisms on a long-term basis. And being able to drive the cost mechanisms on a long-term basis really can drop the cost of the overall product over a very, very long period.
Any final comments, Vic?
Absolutely. No, I would echo what both of them said, but one thing I would note is I don't think it's a big factor when making a decision as a customer on how recyclable our batteries are. But because of the fact that we're often going in and displacing lead acid batteries, we do get quite a bit of questions on, can I return this the same way I do with a lead acid battery? And is this network of infrastructure to collect these and reintroduce them into the supply chain? I think a lot of our customers expect it to be similar to lead acid when it just isn't today. I don't think it affects their decision to purchase, but I do think that if you're moving from lead acid to lithium, you're moving from an industry that's almost entirely circular, as you just mentioned, to one, especially if you look at LFP, that's not circular at all. There are some gaps that need to be closed there, but they're not preventing customer sales at this point, I would say.
Interesting. So let me segue off of your comments about is the process there to bring the batteries back and reuse them over time. Let's talk about supply chain just for a second. I'm assuming you guys are talking about being flexible, being solutions providers. You're solving a lot of problems along the way that you would hope that your supply chain is already solved or has feature functions available. This is still relatively new, solar plus storage. How long do you think it'll take for the supply chain to completely mature in this arena, whether you're an EPC installer, whether you're an individual component provider, or even your own solutions that you're providing in terms of getting better and more efficient at what you're doing? How long will it really take to get good at it?
I can kick off on this one. So I think as long as we're seeing significant growth in the electric industry, we're going to see significant supply chain issues. I think those two go hand in hand. So my hope is that we continue to have this battle for a long time. And I think it's a one we can win, right? And I think if we plan well, we can continue to knock down the barriers of supply chain. But I don't think in the near-term future, with the growth of data centers, with the growth of electric cars in the U.S., with increased electrification in almost all that we do, I expect us to see this challenge for many years to come.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would argue that in our industry, nothing is ever the same, and there's always innovation. That's part of the reason why we love it, right? But I would say as the technologies develop, we're always going to have a supply chain issue of some sort. But it really goes down to our ability and our willingness to work with our distributors, manufacturers, whatever it may be, and really accurately communicate that to the end user. As long as the timelines are managed, most, in my experience at least, I really don't have a lot of supply chain issues, I would say, that really affects our projects. I will say I'm very optimistic about the future, specifically because, I mean, we've been able to tour a bunch of different, new battery plants, a bunch of different, solar manufacturing plants that are still popping up. The momentum has not stopped. And so that's really exciting to know that you basically have it right at your next door if you need it. So that helps supply chain, but I do think that we'll have these things that we need to tweak every single year. New problems will arise that maybe we haven't even thought about now, but it's really on us to really make sure that we manage it and make sure that our end users are happy.
For us, I think the biggest supply chain question, both in the near and long term, is LFP cells. Right now, it is impossible to find an LFP cell at scale, at high quality outside of China, quite frankly. And, onshoring or diversifying that supply chain, I don't think the path has been clearly laid out. I think it's difficult. LFP is the cheapest chemistry. It's the most widely controlled, tightly controlled by China, I would argue, as well. And it's not just the cells, but it's the raw materials. So for LFP cathode, you need lithium, iron, and phosphate. In China, you can get the iron phosphate for free because of it's a waste product of the titanium industry. That's not the case here. You can't get the raw materials to even make the components that go into these LFP cells for free, much less at a cost-effective manner. So the biggest uncertainty for us right now is what's going to happen with LFP and where are these cell factories going to pop up? Are they going to be viable? Are they going to get priced out of market? What role are these secondary markets such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, potentially India going to play in terms of supply into that? And that's really the biggest uncertainty I'm seeing right now is LFP and the fact that it's so cheap.
DOE, DOD, and a number of other investors are really trying to change that equation with investment here in North America, right? Do you see having a North American supply for lithium cells in the near future?
Panasonic's been making them for quite some time here in Nevada, so we have had a gigafactory in the United States for I think almost a decade now. So it's not like we've never done it before. I think the formula we're seeing more and more is rely on an Asian partner, leverage their expertise onshore in the form of a joint venture or something like that. And I think that model will continue, and we're seeing that across the country. But I do think with LFP, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, simply because of the raw material supply chain. And so I'm really interested to see. Right now, we've got, especially here in Nevada, we've got, I would argue, one of the best lithium loops you could find in the United States. You have mines like Ioneer and Lithium Lithium Americas that are firing up here in the state of Nevada to pull lithium out of the ground. You have cell manufacturers like Panasonic located here. You have system integrators such as Dragonfly or even Tesla located here. And then now you have Redwood and the recyclers taking these to end of life here. What you don't have, unfortunately, is the key pieces to turn lithium into LFP cathode or lithium into NMC NCA cathode. And those processes, whether it's the refining or the manufacturing of the cathode active material, are very, very low margin. And therefore, it's going to be the hardest piece to onshore. And until they are, we're still going to be reliant on China for some of those raw materials.
Wow. Well, this is something we'll watch closely over the next few years. Okay, last question. Low growth, tremendous amount of low growth, right? We've got EVs coming online. We've got data centers coming online. Will solar plus storage be able to keep up? Or will we need to be in fear of a leapfrog technologies such as small nuclear reactors or other sources of energy? Will we be able to keep up with solar plus storage?
I think the future is bright for solar. One of the comments you made earlier that I really liked is it's the deployment speed, which I think isn't being appreciated enough. Something interesting I learned is if you look, you mentioned nuclear reactors. One of the largest markets for new nuclear energy is India. And even India now is starting to think about, well, we're 10 years away from the deployment of some of these reactors. Wouldn't it be easier just to throw solar out in stages? And so I think the future is very bright. I don't think the threat from nuclear is as dangerous as necessarily we might think. because those costs of entry are just so different right now, and the timeline for deployment is so different that I think the end applications are going to end up separating out to some degree as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would also add, as somebody who started in the residential space and just added on commercial after that, in a lot of ways, my heart really still is with the residential customers. And so as we see the load growth exploding with data centers, I mean, everybody's ChatGPTing everything left and right. And so for us, it's an interesting case study to have a look at the homes within even like a 10-mile radius of these massive data centers. They're having issues with water and water pressure. They're having issues with, connectivity, all types of things. And when we look at solar, yes, on a large scale, I definitely do think that the future is bright. But even on a small scale, when you're talking about residential homes, it can really mend, I think, the gaps that this AI integration, this growth period that we're going through as an entire society here in the States, I think it can really soften the blow that a lot of stakeholders are facing. So in our experience, we do see a lot of homes around data centers, especially in Georgia as they're popping up, going forward with the solar decision, and it literally solves all of the problems that they face just by having that data center nearby.
Interesting. So it's as much for resiliency for the homeowner as it is actually matching the load growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think as we see data centers grow, right, because that's the probably the largest mechanism in our current situation to see load growth, right? We've seen them go from about 20 megawatts per data center to 200, and now they're working on 2 gigawatt data centers, and it won't be long before they're talking about 20, right? And just if you start doing the scaling math, I think to start thinking about what types of technologies will be able to solve that problem, the only answer I've been able to come up with is all of them. I think we'll need all of them. And I think as we see that growth happen, I think there'll be space for solar. I think there'll be space for SMNRs. I think it'll happen on a different time scale. It's not going to happen next year. I think there'll be space for natural gas. I think there'll be space for everyone to play in this marketplace. I think storage will be a feature set here because in a lot of the various technologies, let's say in SMNR, what you're going to see is a very stable reactor generating a stable amount of electricity, and that's not how the grid uses electricity. So, and as we see those adaptations happen, we believe that storage is going to be a feature set in almost all of those technologies in order to see a long-term sustainable grid.
Great note to end on. Lots of demand, lots of interest in all these products, and a place to keep RE Plus around for many years to come. So thank you. Great session. We do have a little bit of time. If there's anybody in the audience that has a question or two, I think we can entertain that.
Do you see the solar being an add-on or like a backup, or is it actually the only system which will be running?
Right now, it's definitely an add-on. Most of our applications, the main source of charge for the hotel bank will not be solar. It'll be charging off the alternator while they're driving down the road. So right now, solar is definitely an add-on.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. This has been a great panel, a great set of experts here with us that's sharing their knowledge, and I just want to thank them and thank you, the audience, for being here.